I'm good.
Well, let's open up the mailbag here for all the listeners out there. As many of the questions coming in, it's amazing. Let's get your thoughts on Tony Roten. It's amazing that this poor guy, he's in this middle of a nice season here, and this happens. And what do you think is going to end up ultimately happening? Do you think he's going to have to get the surgery or just kind of rest it out? But how much of an effect do you think an injury like this will have on him?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's, ACLs are something that I don't want to say they're commonplace, but people come back to them quite a bit nowadays. But with a guy whose game is so much based on his athleticism, any kind of lower body injury like that is always somewhat of a concern. I think, and this isn't coming from any inside information, just kind of my gut feeling that he does end up getting surgery on that. I think that's probably his best course long term. I think almost regardless of what happens, he's missing the rest of the year anyway. So I think they're going to go with the safer approach, and I think that is probably going to end up being surgery. But I think he's wanting to get more opinions on it because surgery is a scary thing.
That's a shame too, because that's a guy that he's very young. You want to see him continue to play and continue to develop. I think people forget to realize how young he really is. That he's got a lot of maturing still left to do.
Certainly, I mean he's only 21 years old. He's almost a good two years younger than Michael Carter-Williams. And he's the type of guy who, if that jump shot ever catches up, he has some serious potential. It will be interesting to see how Michael Carter-Williams approaches running the team for the rest of the year, whether or not he tries to give them that scoring that they're missing from Tony Roten being out, or whether or not he's able to stay and play a little more in control, like he did against Toronto, which was probably one of his better games of the season. So it'll be interesting to see whether he avoids that urge to kind of pick up more of a scoring load than he probably realistically should. So it'll be a good situation to try to evaluate Michael Carter-Williams in.
Derek, this question from Rodney, and he wants to know, several media outlets are talking about Nick Stauskas, that he now be available. I think both of us liked him at draft time. Do you think the Sixers would be interested in making a move for a young guy like that?
Well, I mean, the rumor was that they were interested in him. There was that rumor of them trading up with the Kings at 8. The Kings are looking for a shot blocker, either a weak side shot blocker to pair with DeMarcus Cousins, or more of a stretch four to play alongside of DeMarcus Cousins. And the Sixers don't really have any of that, so there's not that one-to-one fit. Now, whether or not there might be a situation where, the Sixers could be a third team, send another team an asset who has who has a stretch four or a shot blocker, and then that team sends it to Sacramento. That anything's in play. I don't think right now I see the Sixers and the Kings being a fit, though, at least unless there's a third team brought in.
Derek, obviously, and I liked Nick Stauskas back in the draft time. He just hasn't really got a lot of playing time out there for him. There's another question regarding Joel Embiid's foot. What is the real status about his injury? Where is he with that foot injury?
Well, I mean, the report that he was approaching 300, and then there was the denial a couple days later that he had never gotten above 275. Overall, he definitely looks like he's added weight, but I don't know if it was a reaction to that report, whether they were really desirous to show that he's making progress. But before the next game, he was really, he probably had what was the hardest workout that we've seen before the game. He was working out for a good hour or more. He was doing more shooting in what would be described as a drill type scenario, over and over in quick succession. He looked good. He was hitting 3-pointers. He was practicing some post moves. He was jumping a little more than he was otherwise. He looks like he's being cleared. He's obviously not taking part in 5-on-5s or really anything like that. But he looks like he's making a little bit of progress. I still don't think he plays this year. I would be surprised. I think it's going to be another thing where even if he's ready come March, they're going to err on the side of caution. But he does look like he's able to do a little bit more on the basketball court.
Derek Bodner is with us here, and, of course, at Derek Bodner, NBA. Looking at the Sixers mailbag, one of the questions talks about free agency. What is the free agency looking like next summer? Do you think the Sixers might be a player in the free agent period next year or this upcoming offseason?
Well, I mean, there's a bunch of guys who could theoretically be options. The one that comes up the most is Jimmy Butler in the season he's having with Chicago. Kawhi Leonard also comes up a lot as well. I think both of those teams end up staying with, I think Butler ends up staying with the Bulls, and I think Kawhi ends up staying with the Spurs. I think there's a chance. I don't think they're probably going to make the splash that many are looking for. I think it's going to be a supplemental piece, probably another wing who can shoot and play some defense, something of that sort. But I don't think it's impossible. I don't think it's necessarily going to be splashed if they want to, but it could be more than the last 2 seasons. I think after the draft, we'll have a much better read on what they're going to do in free agency, because whoever they draft, they're going to want to give minutes to.
Derek, obviously, you wrote a nice piece, too. It's up at 97.3 ESPN.com and Liberty Ballers about Michael Carter-Williams and Nerlens Noel and their relationship. You talked to a couple of their AAU coaches. What are some of the things that really stood out about the findings there?
Yeah, well, I talked to their AAU coach, who also ironically happened to coach Brett Brown at Boston University way back when. But just to kind of get what the dynamic was between them. We've heard that they were AAU teammates, but a lot of times there's teammates who see each other at games and practices and they never see each other off the court. The main takeaway I got was just how much time they spent together off the court, how much voluntary time they spent together. The way it was described to me was that Nerlens, Michael's whole family was involved in basketball. His mom coached and played. His stepfather coached and played. And his biological father was actually recruited by Stan Van Gundy way back when. He coached and played. So he has a lot of coaches in his family. And it seemed like Nerlens, that really excited him. It kind of whetted his basketball appetite. And the two of them would play with Michael's stepdad, would go work out together. And just spend an inordinate amount of time together. He said that there were no problems with them in terms of, not getting the ball enough, in terms of disagreements or fights on or off the court, that they were really close. And that's kind of what, in the AAU season, he had them for 3 seasons. So he estimated like 180 games or so that he coached them.
Wow.
So he seemed like, in terms of someone who knows them in a basketball environment, he seemed very confident that whatever problems they're having were related to, the struggles of competitive guys trying to, basically will a team to victory right now. And that whatever problems they were having, that, it was 2 friends fighting. It wasn't, a toxic locker room environment or something they couldn't overcome. And
check out the full story, AAU coach talking to Derek, of course, at 97.3 ESPN.com, at Derek Bodner, NBA. Sixers tonight right here on 97.3. Derek's on his way. All right, man. Take care, bud.
Yep, you too.